All right, so let's take a look at where we left off last time. We have this UI here that we created, and we have where our player can win. We have the ball moving. Next, let's create a UI manager. So I'm going to create a empty game object. And forgive me if we created this in the previous video. I had to do a little bit of reworking before this tutorial. So anyway, so here we have a UI manager, and then we have a UI manager script. It's essentially empty right now, so I'm just going to drag and drop this on here. And then let's go ahead and open this up in our code editor. Okay, and then also what I'd like to do is I'd like to look at our game manager because we're going to be accessing our game manager a lot within our UI manager. So I'm going to pause the video and jump back into Unity and open that up. All right, so I'm just going to double click the game manager script, and then we will see both in our editor. All right, I'm going to go ahead and push Shift and Enter. Then I'm going to close it here so that it docks both next to each other. Now the first thing we need to do, and I'm just going to be like typing, essentially pausing, pasting, or pausing and typing, so you don't have to watch me type everything. But we need to access this game manager script. And if you remember last time, we did this a couple times in the previous videos, is we made a variable called game manager of type game manager, which is the name of our script, and then we attached it. So let's go ahead and do that. All right, so here you can see we have this public variable called game manager, and it's accessing the script. So let's jump back into Unity and let's drag our game manager object into this exposed field. All right, so let's select our UI manager, and now you can see we have this exposed game manager. Let's drop that in here. Excellent. So now we have access to this. We could use code to find it in the scene and all this other stuff, but for now I don't want to overcomplicate it. And just by doing this, now our game manager variable can access the different elements of the game manager script. Now this UI manager is going to really kind of control our entire user interface. So I'm going to create a bunch of variables right now. And each one of these variables is going to essentially store player one score, player two, like the UI for the player one score. And I'm going to position those just below our game manager here. Okay, so you'll notice that we have an error here, and the reason for that is we need to add a using TMP Pro. So now we can use this class that's going to have access to all of this good stuff. So we have a text mesh pro data type, which really just lets us store the UI element, which is the player one that we created score, and then player two, and then winner text, and then the winner panel. So let's go, I'm going to pause this and let's go ahead and hook this all up. All right, now you can see that this is all exposed. So if we open our canvas, if you recall, we created a winner screen here. We also have these going on, which is within our in-game UI. So for player one score text, that's going to go in here. And then player score two text is going to go in here. And then the text that says whether or not we're winning is this right here. So let's go ahead and drag that into here. And if you find that it's difficult to click back and forth, you can click this little lock here. And then now whenever you click off, it'll hold that. And then you can grab things like your win screen here. So let's uncheck that lock, and you'll notice it'll go away. Now the reason I unchecked it was because I don't want to forget that that is there, or forget that that's locked, and then I'm wondering why I can't get off that panel. All right, I'm gonna hit Control S to save these settings here. And let's go in and start adding our listeners to our UI manager. Okay, so if you recall from our game manager, we have this start method here, and this is actually created by Unity. And what it is the second this start is called, it calls the start game method, which is this, which resets our scores, which if you recall, goes all the way down here, and it sets both of our scores to 0. And then we do an on game start invoke. Now remember, this notifies all the listeners that the game has started. So you might be like, where is that code? Well, if I click on this and I hit F12, it'll take us up here to this Unity event called onGameStart. Now you might be wondering, well, where the heck is this invoke from? Well, invoke is part of the event system, and it just means start. So like onGameStart has started. It's true now. It works. And for example, like when we're ready to end our game, we just do onGameOwn and invoke. This is, again, it's just saying do something. So this is just saying like right now, this is true. Our game has started. It's not it's not really doing anything other than saying that the word true. So when we use this again later, we're checking if this has started or if this is true, right? And the name on game start here could really just be anything, but we named it on game start because it's more descriptive. So inside this start method, again, same thing as before in this script. It's just everything that's in here will start. I'm going to add a listener to check if our game has started. And if it has started, I'm going to call a method to do something. So let's go ahead and look at what that code looks like. Okay. So you can pause it as I go along and type this out. So we have Game Manager, which remember, this is giving us access to the script. And then we're going to check on game start. And so what this gives us is the ability to listen for an event. We don't know what that event is yet. So we know that on game start at the very start of the script is set to true. So since this is set to true, I'm listening for if it's true or not, or it started. We're going to call a method called onGameStart. Now, we haven't created that method. That's why it's red. So I'm going to right click and I'm going to go show context and I'm going to do create method. I think there's something equivalent in Visual Studio. Either way, just type it out so it looks like this. So what's happening here? The second this code starts up, right, we're going to check if this has started, which it has, because we did start game here and it has been invoked, on game start invoked. So this is true. So it's going to jump to this method. And I'm going to delete this line here. And we're going to do something. And what I'd like to do is something pretty simple. So I'm going to save this, and I'm going to jump back into Unity. Okay, here we are back in Unity. And we have this panel called Winner Screen, right? And we have access to it in our UI Manager. It's right here. So what I'd like to do is set this to off the very beginning of, we know the game has started. I'm going to turn my winning screen off. Okay, so let's go back into the code and do that. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and paste that in there. And what this is doing is it's saying the winner panel, which remember we placed in here, we're going to set that to false. The second our game starts. We can also do something else where we, well, let's take a look at that first. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and press play, and I want to see if this new text disappears. Perfect, so that's working. All right, let's go back in to our editor and add, let's update this UI here. All right, I have two more variables here. Remember we have these two, access to those two text UIs, player 1 and player 2. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna set both of those to 0 once the game starts. All right, let's test. So we should get rid of this new text, which says which player won, and then we should be able to see 2 zeros here. Cool. Now, one thing though is, wouldn't it be cool if we saw player P1 equals 0 or player 1 equals 0 and then player 2? Let's go back and fix that. So the way we can do that is I'm just going to grab this text here and I'm going to put that in, put some quotes and then hit plus, and then I'm going to paste that and just edit that a little bit. Sorry about the mechanical keyboard. I know it's a little noisy. So I'm going to paste this in here, and we're going to name this player 2. Let's save this and see if that works. Oh, actually, you know what? It looks like we might have to put a space here. Otherwise, it'll be all crammed together. So I put a space and then a colon there. There we go. Player 2, player 1, and then we have a 0. We could move this one over a little bit. So I'm going to just grab my player 1 here because it's going into the side there, or I could scale it down, whatever you want. All right, let's go back and continue to edit our code. All right, so the next thing I want to do in this start method is I want to check if the score has changed, and I want to update that UI. So we're going to do something similar. So I'm just going to hit Control D here. And on game, on score change. Now, if you look up here, notice that we had an on score change inside the game manager, and it's passing in 2 integers, right? So if I go down here and I look, we have on score change event, right? And let's see if I can highlight over this. And let's see, where are we calling on score change? Here we go. Here we go. We have this variable called score here. and we're incrementing score 1 and score 2. That's these variables that we created, right? Right here, score 1 and score 2. So if we go down here and we look at this, string scoring player, right? So scoring player equals sort of the name, and we're kind of passing that in there. So down here at the bottom, we have on score change, invoke, which means start, and we're passing in these two values, player 1's value and player 2's value, right? And let's see where else. We have reset scores, which we can call when our game starts. We got a lot of good stuff that we built into here. I think that's pretty good. So anyway, and then later we call check for winner, which is down here. And this is going to invoke the end game. So let's kind of, I don't want to get too ahead of the sticks or whatever. So let's go back and change this to, instead of on game start, we're going to listen for on score changed. And we want to create a variable, probably called onscore, or a method called onscore change. So I'm going to right click on this again, same thing as before, and I'm going to create this method here. And notice that it automatically created for me with two integer values here. So I'm just going to actually copy the same thing, like the same two variable names that are up here. Let's see. Just so that we can see it, where you have score for player 1 and player 2. You know what? I want to keep everything sort of the same. So I'm going to do player 1 score. And then I'm going to do player 2 score. Just so our variables are descriptive enough. So this hasn't done anything yet. But what it's doing is it's taking in, so we have on score change. So we're listening. We're listening for when this on score change is invoked, which is invoked here. And this thing is invoked anytime we create a score. And these things get updated. And so we're passing in these two values into our listener here. We're passing these two values into here. And it gets a little bit tough. So you might want to like go back, rewrite it, look at this, or do this tutorial twice, because there's such an important concept that you're going to be learning a lot about our events and listeners. So these two values are being passed into here. And then let's go ahead and just display them to the screen. Okay. So you probably like, oh, well, we have these right here. The problem with that is if we do this and we change these to player 1 score, and then we change this to, actually we do need the same thing. Yeah, now that I'm looking at it. And then we want to pass in these variables because these are the ones that are actually updating our score. You'll notice we're going to get an error. And the reason for that is, notice that these aren't actual numbers. These are string values. String values being letters. So right now it's giving us an error. It says cannot convert int to type string. So there's a very simple way. It's a toString method that will convert that to a string. All right, so all I'm going to do is copy this, paste it here, copy this, paste it here, and let me save this, and let's jump back into Unity, and let's take a look at if it updates it with player 1 and then this, and player 2 there. All right, here we are. I'm going to go ahead and press play. I'm going to move my cursor down, and boom, player 2 has scored. All right, so last thing we want to do is we want to make sure that let's do our win-lose scenario, and then we can work on the controls for this second paddle. All right, so I'm going to hit Control. Let me zoom in a little bit. I'm going to duplicate this. And we have a couple things here that we created, these listeners, right? We have a on-score change, and then we have an on-player win that takes in a string value. Well, where is this on-player? I hit F12, by the way, and it made me jump down here. Where are we invoking this? Well, we have a function here method called endgame. And once this invokes, it passes the winning player in. Now, if I select the endgame here, it gives me two usages. I can click there. And I check here. We have a function here called check for winner. And if scoring player 1 is greater than or equal to 1, we pass endgame. That's this method all the way up here. We pass in player 1. And if the player 2 scores more than 1, then we pass in player 2 here. So we want to use all of that inside of here. So what we're going to do is I'm going to grab on player win here, and I'm just going to paste it here. And the thing that we're listening for is it's giving us an error because we already have this method here. So I need to do I need to create a player method. So I'm just going to name it the same thing, on player win. And I'm just going to right click on it, quick actions, and I'm going to let it create a method for me just to save time. So what I'm going to do here is on our player, as our player wins, I want to reactivate that winner panel, and I want to let it know, probably first and then activate it, who won. All right, so I'm going to change the string here to winner. And remember, over here in score, right? Down at the bottom here, oh, not score, sorry, check for winner here. We're going to pass that end game, player 1 or player 2. So that's why we only need one variable here, right? And if we go to end game here, let me hit F12 on that. You can see we're invoking on player win, we're invoking whatever the winning player is here. So this winning player, player 1 and player 2, is going to get passed in. It's going to be saved here, but you probably guessed right. We didn't actually set our panel to active. So let me go ahead and hit Control S to save this. And we'll jump back in Unity, and I'll show you that it never actually shows us who the winner is. All right, so here we are back in Unity. I'm going to press play. And if I go down, it stored player 2 won, but it never actually turned that back on. So what I would do is I'm going to pause the video and jump back into Writer. So we're back in Writer. And I want to give you a hint, but do you remember how we set the panel to false? Go ahead and pause the video and try to see if you could figure out how to turn that on or make it back to true, and if it worked. All right, if you typed something like this, you were correct. So I'm going to go ahead and hit Control S to save this, and let's go back and test it. All right, I pressed play, and I'm starting it up. I'm going to go ahead and move my panel down. Boom, player 2 wins. Now it's going to keep counting up because we never ended the actual game, right? Like we didn't turn off this panel or set it to deactivate or whatever once the player has won, right? So I'm going to go ahead and save this. And once the player wins, we have this in-game menu. Maybe we want to, I don't know, like we want to set the, let's see, here's our asset holder. We want to just set, we want to turn this off, maybe, asset holder. And they could just still see the score or something. So let's do that. All right, so in here in our UI manager, I'm just going to hit Control D, and I copied this game object, and I'm going to call this asset panel. I'm going to hit Control S. I'm going to copy this, and down here where on a player win, we can just kind of, before this is activated to true, we'll set active to false. And it's kind of like a quick way to end the game. All right, so here we are back in Unity. Now remember, for our UI manager, we're going to get an error if we don't drag our asset holder into there. So let's go ahead and press play. And player 2 wins, and our game is over. So what I'd like you to do as part of your homework assignment is try to figure out how to script this paddle moving up and down. And I'm going to give you a few hints. Make this panel go up and down on your own, just like this one. So if we select inside of our asset holder, our player 01 paddle, you'll notice that it has its own player controller. So let's go ahead and open that up. So you're going to either inside of here, like we have a float move vertical. I'll get you started. Let me get you started because I know some of you are very, very new to Unity. And even though you've built a couple games, I'm just going to get you started. All right, so back in Unity, you can go to Edit and then Project Settings and then Input Manager. And you'll notice that there is a vertical here. So what you can do is you can make this 31, and that'll add another one down at the bottom. And you can kind of copy these. Like it says vertical, up and down. Well, maybe the person on the right is actually, so instead of it being called vertical, when I typed in 31, it just copied the last thing. You can call this player 2. And remember your spelling because you're going to have to script it that way. So player 2. And then, well, what's the negative button? Well, maybe you want them to play with, maybe negative is, well, I mean, there's a left and right here, but maybe that's not what you want. I guess like you could go with that, or maybe it could be a, well, let's leave it left and right. Let's see what that does. You could do like type in the number 9. But let's see, this is the left and right arrow. And for the negative and positive buttons, let's see, what else could we do? Alternative buttons could be S and W. So let's go ahead and add those. Let's do 9 and 3. Actually, this should be 3, I believe, and this should be 9, because I think that's right. And then let's copy this. And let's player controller. Do we want to go with a separate script here? I think it might be easier for you guys to remember if we have a script that just controls the second player. And yeah, let's do that. So, all right, so I'm going to right click into the scripts folder, and I'm going to create another C# script, and I'm going to call this player 02 controller. And let's make sure that's a 0. All right, let's open that up. And then I'm going to hit Control Enter here. Oops. Or Shift Enter rather. I'm going to close my game manager. I'm going to close it here, and then I'm going to just copy a bunch of code. So notice, and I'm going to just comment this, this is the name of our thing like vertical. So we can do, really you can just copy everything inside of here. Let's actually, I'm going to move this. I'm holding Alt and up arrow. I'm going to move this to the top, and I'm going to delete everything inside of here except for my open and close curly braces. And then I'm going to copy everything in here except my open and close curly braces. And then instead of vertical name here, I'm going to copy and paste player 2. And I'm going to save it. And then let's press play. This one works. And we need to select our player 2 paddle, and we need to grab our player 2 controller, drop it in here. And let's make sure our player 2 paddle also has a rigid body. And let's turn off gravity. Let's press play. Whoa. And let's make sure that our paddle's mass is a lot here. You know, I'm going back in here and I'm noticing that I didn't mark it as keyboard or mouse buttons. I left it as joystick. And then we want to make sure that this is also the x-axis here. And I just kind of copied all the values. All right, let's close this and see if that works now. We have player 02. And actually that did work. So if I push my right and left buttons, I can go down. But the issue though too is we want to make sure that our paddle, so I'm going to hit F to focus on this. This paddle here has all of these locked. We just want to go through and make sure all of these coordinates are the same. So now when I hit Control S and I save this, We now have a 2-player game, and player 2 wins. And let's see if player 1 can win. So player 1 wins. All right, that concludes this tutorial on the Pong series for class. In the next game, we'll take a look at using a lot of these same concepts. And again, don't worry if you're feeling a little confused by the event system. We're going to be doing a lot of it. We'll create something like asteroids or space invaders.